everyone. I welcome you to another session of the Network Seminar Series hosted by the Center for Network Intelligence at the Robert Bosch Center for Cyber-Physical Systems, IISc. Today's talk is by Ajit Suresh, and he would be giving a talk on Swift, super fast and robust, privacy-preserving machine learning. Ajit is a PhD research scholar in the Cryptography and Information Security Lab at IISc. His work orbits around secure multi-party computation, also known as MPC. Specifically, he works in the area of MPC for small number of parties with applications to privacy-preserving machine learning. He is also a recipient of the Google PhD Fellowship for the year 2019. Before we move on to the talk, we'd like to remind the audience to subscribe to our Google group for information on future talks, and you can also visit our website for more details. I'll be pasting the links in the chat box, so you can please check. And finally, we'd also like to request the audience to keep your microphones on silent for the duration of the talk. And for questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll moderate it with Ajit. So over to you, Ajit.
Hello. Thanks to Nishad for the introduction. So good evening to all. Myself, Ajit Suresh. I'm a PhD student at CRIS Lab. It's the lab at Computer Science Department. So today I will be presenting our work titled Swift, Superfast and Robust Privacy Preserving Machine Learning. This is a joint work with Nishad Koti, Mahak Pancholi, and my advisor Arpita Patra. And the full version is available at ePrint 2020/592. And the work will be appearing at the 30th Usenix Security Symposium. Before going into the talk, let me give you a brief outline. So I will start the talk with an introduction to the notion of privacy in machine learning. Then we will see the technique of secure outsourced computation, or in short, SOC. After that, I will provide the details of the area in which I am working, which is secure multi-party computation, or in short, MPC. This will be followed by our three-layer framework architecture. So we will see some details of how we design the protocols using a three-layer framework architecture in a layer-wise manner. Towards the end, I will provide some technical details on the Swift protocol itself. So machine learning is one of the fastest growing research domains of today, and the area has showcased its applications in several areas such as automobile, healthcare, finance, etc. In general, on a high level, if you consider machine learning, you can classify the entire task into two phases. The first one is training, and the next one is inference. So during training, there are several data owners who would like to collectively train a model. So the data owners will provide their inputs, and they will jointly perform some computation, and then they will train a model. And once a model is properly trained, this trained model is used to provide this machine learning as a service. For instance, there are several companies like Amazon Cloud, Amazon Web Services, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud, etc., that provides this machine learning as a service. They will deploy one of this trained machine learning model in cloud, and the clients, they can query to this service and get back the result. This will be on a pay-per-use basis. Now, one of the key features that determines the quality of a machine learning model is the amount of data that it used to train the model. So the more the data, the better the model be. But simultaneously, this introduces a like security issue, which is mainly the privacy of the data, because there are like lot of data, and we are now concerned about the privacy of the data. We will come to like how to tackle this privacy issue in a few slides. Before that, I'll introduce you the notion of this secure outsourced computation. So the secure outsourced computation is a technique where the computation is outsourced to a set of powerful servers. This is mainly because most of the end users still now, they are not capable of performing a full-fledged machine learning algorithm, which is kind of expensive these days. So on their end machines, for instance, mobile or something. So in this sense, what they can do is they can hire a set of servers and offload the computation to these servers. So this like changes with respect to training and inference. For instance, for the training, the different data owners can distribute their shares among distribute their inputs among these servers while preserving privacy in such a way that the servers can perform all the computations required. And finally, the data owners, they will get back the final computed model. And as I mentioned, this the one of the key features of this SOC setting is that the average end users benefit. Moreover, it solves the issue for a large population. For instance, I want to perform an ML training considering, let's say, 100 clients. So if I naively perform the computation among these clients, then all these clients has to communicate among each other through, like, let's say, internet and all, and which will be expensive. So if you hire some few servers, then everyone can have establish a connection between these servers only, and then distribute their data. And once the data is distributed, they can go offline, and the servers will perform the computation. And finally, at the end of computation, the result is then given back to the respective parties. So this SOC setting is like a practically motivated setting, which has all these benefits. And the desired properties of an SOC setting are, first one is privacy. That means the input data from each of these data owners should remain private. Okay, even if some of these servers gets corrupt or something. Next one is efficiency. We want the computation to be as efficient as possible. And the third and most important property is the robustness. So by robustness, what we meant is some of the parties in this system, they can be corrupt and they will try to tamper the system or tamper the functionality of the system. For this, what we can do is we introduce this notion of robustness that guarantees that whatever be the strategy of these corrupt parties, the honest parties in this system, they are guaranteed to get the output. So this is very a strong assumption in the sense of a security of a protocol, because this will attract more people to the system. And to achieve the desired properties in the secure outsourced computation, we use the technique of MPC, or secure multi-party computation. Secure multi-party computation is a wonderful area introduced by Andrew C. Yao in 1982. It allows a set of parties with their private inputs to compute some joint function on their inputs. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, the two desired properties of MPC are as follows. The first one is correctness. That means the parties should obtain the correct function output after the protocol execution. And next one is privacy. That means nothing more than the function output should be revealed. Here I should clarify that whatever the parties can compute using their inputs and the function output, that's allowed. But other than that, nothing else should be revealed. So these are the two desired properties of MPC. Now, to capture the corrupt parties in the system, we use the notion of an entity called an adversary. So this is mainly because we always think that there is a very high chance that the corrupt parties can always collude and work together to tamper the system. So for this, we introduce the notion of an adversary who takes control over the corrupt parties. So in this case, let's say these two people are the corrupt parties. And there are several traits by which we can classify this adversary. And one such trait classifies the adversary based on the level of corruption. So that classifies the adversary into semi-honest and malicious. So semi-honest is a weaker notion of adversary where the corrupt parties are guaranteed to follow the protocol steps, but they will always try to grab some extra information. Whereas in malicious, which is the stronger notion, we don't have any guarantee on how the corrupt parties work. So essentially, the semi-honest is a stepping stone towards designing protocols for the malicious security. So usually what we do is we design protocols for semi-honest security. Then we will elevate to malicious security by enforcing some verification checks and all. So this is how it works usually. So malicious is the stronger notion where we don't have any guarantee on how the corrupt party works. Another classification is based on the number of corruptions. In an honest majority setting, we assume among the, let's say n parties, majority of the parties are honest. So only a minority are corrupt. So this is a weaker notion. And the more stronger notion is the dishonest majority, where all but one can be corrupt. Okay. And based on the security guarantees, we classify the protocols into mainly three categories. The first one is abort. So this is the weakest notion within this malicious security, where the corrupt parties, they can make some of the selected honest parties abort during the protocol. That means at the end of the protocol, it can happen that the corrupt parties receive the output, whereas some or all of the honest parties may not receive the output. So this is the weakest notion within the malicious security. Next, one is fairness, which is slightly a stronger notion. Here, the guarantee is that either everyone or no one gets the output. This means the adversary, if it is getting the output, then it is guaranteed that all the parties are getting the output. Otherwise, no one is getting the output. And in this setting also, there is a case where adversary, let's say it is planning that, okay, I don't want the output so that no one gets the output. So in this case also, after all the computation, the parties may not get anything. And to tackle this issue, we have this notion of guaranteed output delivery or GOD, where it is guaranteed that irrespective of the adversary's behavior, all the honest parties are guaranteed to get the output. Now, I will introduce our three-layer framework specifically designed with an end goal of deploying this in the privacy-preserved machine learning. So in this three-layer framework, the first layer consists of basic primitives for which the respective MPC protocols are first designed. So this mainly includes this multiplication because this is one of the key primitive in MPC where the parties needs to communicate with each other. When it comes to machine learning, the multiplication is kind of replaced with a scalar dot product, where instead of multiplying two values, you will be performing a scalar dot product on two vectors. Then there are other components like bit extraction, bit injection, and mixed protocol conversions. For this talk, I will not be going into the details of these blocks. Using efficient protocols designed for these blocks, we will then construct this layer 2. So layer 2, you can view it as like some advanced blocks which will finally help in realizing efficient machine learning algorithms. So this includes matrix multiplication, secure comparison, then this truncation technique when we want to deal with real values like that. Using the layer 2 blocks, finally in this work, we considered the machine learning algorithms of logistic regression and deep neural networks. So these blocks suffices to basically carry out the training and inference of this logistic regression as well as the inference of neural networks. Now I will introduce you the details of this Swift protocol. In Swift, we considered the setting of 3 parties and 4 parties with malicious corruption. And this is mainly in the honest majority setting. That means among this either 3 or 4 parties, we consider at most 1 party can be corrupt. This is a practically motivated setting where like we can achieve very efficient protocols. And we aim for this stronger security notion of guaranteed output delivery. Moreover, we consider the pre-processing model where the entire protocol is divided into 2 phases. The first phase is pre-processing phase. This is an input independent phase where relatively slow and expensive operations are carried out. So this is like, you can think of like, okay, there is a protocol that needs to be executed, let's say 3 days after from today. Then what we'll do is we will facilitate the servers and they will communicate amongst themselves some data which can facilitate in the when the actual data comes in. So this is basically an input independent phase. This has no relation with the inputs. So this they will be preparing some data. It's what do you say? It's some pre-processing data itself. That's what we call in the protocol. Now, once the pre-processing phase is set, what we will do is we will execute the online phase when the actual input kicks in. So this is an input dependent computation, and our goal is to make this phase so as fast as possible. Because in practical deployment, this is what is needed. When the actual inputs are given, we should get the output as early as possible, or and also as efficient as possible. By efficiency, I mean with minimal communication and computation. So this is the end goal of our Swift protocol. Now, let's see some of the technical details of this Swift protocol. So consider a value x, which is being split into 3 parts. Let's say x1, x2, and x3, and it adds up to x. In our protocol, we use a variant called replicated secret sharing. So in a replicated secret sharing, for this case of these 3 parties, what happens is each party will get 2 out of these 3 shares and will be missing exactly 1 share. So without that share, these other shares are basically meaningless because that share can be anything and that will define the underlying value x. And this is basically the structure of a replicated sharing. And in a secret share evaluation paradigm, what happens is consider a simple multiplication gate where the goal is we have inputs x and y, and the goal is to compute simply z as x times y. In a secret shared evaluation technique, what happens is first the inputs X and Y will be generated in a secret shared paradigm. And using some MPC protocol, the output is again computed in a secret shared fashion. And this output may go as an input to some other gates or maybe the final output. If this Z is the final output of the protocol, then using the shares, parties will compute back what the Z is. So this is a general structure of how a secret shared evaluation works. Instead of going to this naive secret shared replicated secret sharing method, in this Swift, what we use is something called masked evaluation. So in masked evaluation, a value X is basically masked using a mask. So the mask we represent using a lambda. So the mask corresponding to X is lambda X. And we basically add this mask to this value. Okay. So without this knowledge of mask, the sum doesn't make any sense. And the sum we denote it as mx. So this is the masked value and this is the mask of that value. And during the pre-processing, as I said, so here itself you can see that this mx is the value which is dependent on x and this lambda x is totally independent of x because lambda x can be any random value. And once x comes in, the mx is defined. So mx is basically the input dependent part and lambda x is the input independent part. And as I told earlier, in the pre-processing phase, first the parties will perform some operations using these lambda values. So this is basically completely input independent phase. And during the online phase, the parties will start with the masked values of these inputs X and Y. And the goal is to compute the masked value Z as the output. So this will complete the entire protocol. Now we will see for a multiplication gate, given the sharing of X and Y, how this masked value will be computed. So as I told you earlier, we are using a slightly different variant of this replicated secret sharing, where this mask lambda X, it is replicatedly secret shared among these parties P1, P2, P3. So you can see that it has 3 parts and each party will be missing exactly one part out of it. And this masked value, this mx, is given in clear to both the parties. Not both the parties, sorry, all the parties. Here itself, you can see like in order to get back this x, a party needs 4 pieces of information. One is this mx and the 3 parts of lambda x. And each of these parties will be missing exactly one piece of information. So, like I said, we will start with the sharing of X and Y according to our sharing semantics, and we'll end up in the sharing of Z again according to our sharing semantics. So this is the overall evaluation strategy for a single multiplication gate. So consider two inputs X and Y, and the sharing of X is given using this set of shares for this corresponding to X, and similarly for Y, the parties have this set of shares. Now, what we want is the output, which is of the form lambda z1, lambda z3, mz, and etc. for this case of z value. During the pre-processing, first the parties non-interactively sample these values lambda z1, lambda z2, and lambda z3 in such a way that P1 gets z1 and z3, P2 gets Z2 and Z3, and P3 gets Z1 and Z2. I'm not going into the technical detail. There is a technique by which the parties can collectively sample these values without any communication. So this is using a technique called a pseudo-random function, which is there in the details is provided in the paper. So this phase is basically non-interactive. Now the goal is that we got basically half our goal. It's like all the lambda z values are in place, and the goal is that all the parties P1, P2, P3 should get this mz value. Now we will analyze mz based on our requirement. So according to our sharing semantics, mz is defined as z plus lambda z. And since this is a multiplication, we want z to be xy. So our goal is mz should be same as xy plus lambda z. And we will put the values of x and y in terms of their mass. So x is nothing but mx minus lambda x and y is nothing but my minus lambda y. So mz will be mx minus lambda x times my minus lambda y plus lambda z. Just open up this expression. What we will be getting is mz is of this form. It's mx my minus mx lambda y minus my lambda x plus lambda y plus lambda z. And we will focus on this particular equation next and how to compute this expression. Now, note that all the parties P1, P2, P3, they possess this Mx and My in clear as part of the sharing semantics. So instead of computing this Mz directly, we compute Y as Mz minus Mx My. So that this first term need not be computed because this term they can locally add once they get back Y, because this is something that they already possess. So we will focus our attention on computing Y, which is Mz minus Mx My. So the secret sharing is done in such a way that two set of parties out of these three parties, let's say P1, P3, they can compute a Y1 using their set of available values. So I'm just splitting that expression that I need to compute, which is Y, in terms of parts. So this M parts will remain as such, and the lambda is split into three parts. So if I add up Y1 plus Y2 plus Y3, you can see that it will finally result in Y. And there is a small catch here. There is a term which is basically this lambda x times lambda y. And I have denoted that, okay, P1, P3 gets lambda x times lambda y1, P2, P3 gets lambda x times lambda y2, and P1, P2 gets lambda x times lambda y3. So I haven't explained to you like how this is done, but given such a sharing, okay, how the parties proceed further is they compute something of this form. So essentially, the lambda x times lambda y, this is the input independent computation. And this is what exactly they will be computing during the pre-processing. So you can assume this is a black box where the parties communicate with each other and generate the shares of lambda x times lambda y in this form, given the values lambda x and lambda y. So this is the pre-processing of our multiplication protocol for the case of three parties. And the pre-processing costs three elements. Like one party has to send a value to the next party. So I'm not going into the technical details of how this pre-processing is achieved, but as of now, assume that it's a black box, which we can instantiate using any protocol. Even it can be expensive because we are kind of doing that in the pre-processing phase, which is the input independent phase. Now, given these values, parties compute locally this one. And how the parties are going to get back MZ is using this following strategy. First, P1, P3, they will send this Y1 to P2. Okay, now here you can see that P2 can compute both Y2 and Y3, and all it needs to compute Y back is Y1. So this P1, P2 can send to P2. Similarly, P2, P3 can send back Y2 to P1. Now both P1, P2, they can compute Y as Y1 plus Y2 plus Y3, and using their MX and MY, they can compute back what is MZ. And this MZ will be communicated back to P3. So this is the overall structure of the online phase of a multiplication protocol. And as you can see, there are three elements of communication here. One is with respect to Y1, one is with respect to Y2, and one is with respect to MZ. And this comprises of these three communication, and we have a communication overhead of three elements in the online phase. You may get the doubt that okay, both P1 and P3 is sending a value to P2, so this should be two elements. Actually, this is one element. I will come into the details of how this can be instantiated efficiently using one element communication. But assume that this kind of a sending requires one element. The online phase of multiplication requires just three elements only. So I'll just quickly summarize what we discussed so far, the multiplication. So the pre-processing started with P1, P2, P3, non-interactively getting the replicated shares of this lambda set. And the goal was to compute an MZ, which is of this form. So instead of computing MZ, we went to compute Y, which is MZ minus MX MY. And the parties, two out of these three parties locally computed one share of this Y value, such that if you add up Y1 plus Y2, Y1, Y2, and Y3, you will get back Y. Then the communication pattern is P1, P3 send this Y1 to P2, P2, P3 send Y2 to P1, and both of them computed MZ back, and then the MZ is communicated back to P3, which completes the online phase of multiplication. And as I mentioned earlier, we need this computation to be as efficient as possible. And on top of this, we are in a setting of three parties with one corruption. So one among these parties can be corrupt and it can tamper this communication. So we need a mechanism to efficiently transfer this value from P1 and P3 to P2, let's say. And at the same time, since our goal was guaranteed output delivery, we should deliver the message to P2 in such a way that the P2 should get this message for sure. So for this, we introduced the notion of a joint message passing primitive in this work. So this primitive allows us to allows two parties to send a common value to a third party, and the guarantee is that either the recipient will get the correct value, or they will basically identify one honest party among these three parties. Okay, that means okay, there will be a conflicting set. So these two parties are in conflict. So the third person can be an honest party. So that is how the protocol works. I will go into the details of this joint message passing in the next set of slides. But till this point, if you have some doubt, you can raise. You can ask the doubts at this point. Should I like clarify anything till this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any doubts, so I'm proceeding further. So coming to the joint message passing primitive for the case of three parties, there are two senders, sender 1 and sender 2 with a message M, and there is a receiver R. And the functionality, we use this FGEM to denote this functionality that that is used to denote this joint message passing primitive. To the functionality, both the senders will input their message. So we use M and M dash because the parties can input wrong messages also, because there can be one corruption among these three parties. The functionality essentially checks whether the messages are same. If the messages are same, then the functionality conveys that message to the receiver. And if not, they will identify one TTP. So this TTP we use to denote a trusted third party. But without loss of generality, let's assume like okay, sender 1 is a trusted third party. So this trusted third party is someone which everyone can trust. That means like it's an honest party that is identified because we kind of identified a conflicting pair among which one party can be corrupt. That means the third party can be an honest party. Once this trusted third party is identified, its identity is sent to all the parties. Now, for this case where sender 1 is chosen as the trusted party, let's say the sender 2 is having an input Z and receiver is having an input Y for the main computation. So these parties sends their input in clear to this trusted party. The trusted party performs the computation in clear and gets the output, and the output is communicated back to both of the other parties. So this is a common paradigm in which this robust setting works. Going into the technical details of how this joint message passing is instantiated. So first, the sender 1, it will send the message in clear to the receiver. So this M is sent as such to the receiver. So this is basically like one element communication. And from S2, the S2 will send a hash of the same message or hash of M dash to the receiver. And at the receiver's end, it will check first whether the hash of the message received from S1 is same as the hash received from S2. If it is same, it's okay. It will accept the message. If it is not, it is going to basically raise a dispute. So this dispute is raised using an inconsistency bit. So the inconsistency bit B is set to 1 if the hashes are not matching and set to 0 otherwise. And this bit is conveyed back to both S1 and S2. Once receiver conveys this message to S1 and S2, then they will exchange the message among themselves. Okay, this particular bit information. Now, this parties first check. So with respect to this receiver S1, sender S1, sorry, it will check whether it has seen a bit set to 1 either from S2 or from R in the previous step. So if it is the case, then it will broadcast the hash of the message that it conveyed to the receiver. Similarly, for S2, it checks whether it received a bit B set to 1 either from S1 or R, and if it is set to 1, it will broadcast the hash of the message M dash. And at the receiver's end, initially, if its inconsistency bit is set to 1, it will broadcast the hash of the message it received from S1. Okay. Now, since this is a broadcast, that means everyone is on the same page. Everyone can see So this broadcast has a nice property that if someone is broadcasting, the same message will be reached at all the other parties. So everyone is on the same page. Now everyone can simply check whether the values broadcasted by both the senders are they same or not, the hash values. If they are not, that means one among the sender is a corrupt guy. So we put S1 and S2 in a conflicting set. And in that case, we can safely assume this receiver to be a trusted party. And in case if they are same, then we will go for the next case, where we will check whether the hash value broadcasted by this S1 and the value broadcasted by the receiver are same. If they are not same, that means one among them is correct, and the third party S2 can be the trusted party. And for the case if they are also same, then we assume S1 to be the trusted party, because the issue can happen among S2 and R only in this case, because these two directions are already same. So this is a high level overview of how the join message passing primitive works. And among the steps, we can basically split the steps into two phases. So the first phase is sending phase, where the message is simply conveyed to the receiver. So one among the senders, it will convey the message to the receiver. And this consists of send phase, and this will be carried out throughout the evaluation. So instead of performing all the steps that I described, we will just perform the send phase during the evaluation, so that it will take just one element communication for each of the send. So even the two parties are sending to the third party, effectively one party is only sending the value to the recipient. Now the next phase consists of verification, where we verify. Let's say there are like 1,000 executions of a send from this join message passing primitive instances for the same set of parties. Let's say S1 and S2 is sending to R, and there are 1,000 such invocations. So for this case, what happens is we will verify the correctness of all such instances in one shot. And that's exactly why we are basically using this hash checking error. So in the next phase, all the remaining steps are carried out, where the sender S2 will hash all the messages corresponding to these 1,000 instances in one shot and compress it to a single hash and sends to R. So R will perform the same check on these hash values, and the bits are communicated like that, and the bits are then exchanged between S1 and S2. So the rest of the procedure will be the same. And this has the advantage that the overall communication required for this verify phase, it will get amortized over multiple instances. Because for instance, if you consider a deep neural network, it itself has like at least 10,000 calls to the same set of JMP primitives. So that means for 10,000 invocations, the extra communication other than this communication toward from S1 to R is basically one hash and let's say like some bits, some extra bits. So this cost will get vanished if you have enough number of invocations. So that basically concludes the JMP primitive of this three-party setting. Now coming to the four-party case, we have one more party, and the secret sharing semantics is slightly modified. The sharings for P1, P2, P3, they are not changed at all. It will remain the same. And the fourth party P4, it is given all the shares of this lambda, but not MX value. So this still preserves privacy, and this is how it is done. And the corresponding JMP primitive for the case of fourth party becomes a bit lighter. This is because as far as the functionality is concerned, it will first check the messages from both the senders. So if it is same, then it is conveyed to the receiver, similar to the three-party case. And if it is not same, you know that one among these three parties, because they are the only ones who were participating in this particular protocol. So one among these three parties is corrupt, because we are in a setting of four parties with one corruption. So you can safely assume the TTP to be the fourth party. So this makes the JMP primitive itself very easy. Now, coming to our results, we consider the analysis efficiency of our protocol. We analyze the efficiency of our protocol basically based on this cost for the multiplication gate, because in our setting, the secret shared semantics, this addition operation is kind of local. Using our secret sharing semantics, given the shares of X and Y, they can compute the shares of X plus Y locally. So it doesn't require any communication. So the communication is mainly required for the multiplication gates. So that's a parameter to analyze the efficiency. So compared to the state-of-the-art 3PC protocol for this machine learning, so the state-of-the-art protocol was having a communication of 3 elements in the pre-processing and 3 elements in the online, and it was having the security of fairness only. In this work, we could extend the security from fairness to GOD by retaining the same communication cost. So that's the result mainly with respect to the practical setting. And there is another theoretical line of work which requires only 3 element communication in the online phase, and it gives the guaranteed output delivery as well. But like I said, it's a theoretical kind of work because it makes use of distributed zero knowledge techniques to get this communication, and it's very computation in it's it is having very much communication, and it mainly happens in the online phase. So that's one of the main drawback of this protocol. So if you want the overall communication to be minimum, just that's the motivation, then this protocol is good. But if you want a practical scenario where you want the online fast to be as fast as possible, you shouldn't go for this boil at all this protocol, and instead a protocol of this pre-processing paradigm is preferred. Coming to 4PC, when you compare with the state-of-the-art protocol, which is having this guaranteed output delivery, it is having a cost of 6 elements in the pre-processing and 6 elements in the online, which we could reduce to 3 and 3, which is a direct 2x improvement. And compared with the state-of-the-art FAIR framework, we are having the same communication complexity as that of the FAIR framework of Trident. Coming to PPML, the privacy preserved machine learning front, as I told you, this instead of multiplication, the dot product forms one of the key building block in machine learning algorithms. So the dot product of two vectors of length d is given as sum over I equals 1 to d xi times yi. So for this, in the 3PC setting, the state-of-the-art protocol required a communication of 3D elements. So this is basically depending on the number of features of this vector in the pre-processing, but they have a communication of just 3 elements in the online. So essentially their online phase communication is independent of the feature size, whereas the pre-processing communication was dependent on the feature size, and moreover, it was having a security of fair only. So in this work, we could even get rid of this dependency of this communication in the dependency on the feature size in the pre-processing communication as well. So our dot product protocol has a communication which is totally independent of the feature size of the vectors. And this gives a huge improvement in the communication when it comes to machine learning. Because the dot product works over data sets which are typically like even the MNIST data sets, it is having 784 feature size and all. Coming to the 4PC domain, the results are very much similar to the case of this multiplication, because in 4PC, the existing works itself has a communication for dot product independent of the feature size. So we retain the similar results as that of this multiplication. And in addition to this building blocks, we have other efficient protocols for truncation, comparison, and some conversions, etc. We benchmarked our protocols by implementing this logistic regression and deep neural networks. So we considered both the training and inference of this logistic regression and the inference of deep neural networks. So the table shows the results of the 3 and 4 party training and inference, and we compare with the state of the art protocols in the respective security setting. So for the 3PC case, we have very much we have a performance which is almost close to the fair counterpart. Definitely, the fair will perform better in terms of the online runtime because it is having a weaker security. But our overhead is very minimal. And when it comes to 4PC, we have a 2x improvement in terms of performance. And this table 7 and 8 shows the respective performance for this neural network. So we consider 3 neural networks, where the first one is like a 3-layer neural network and going all the way up to this NN3, which is VGC16, which is a very deep neural network consisting of around 16 layers and all. So far that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the wonderful talk, Ajit. We can take a few questions.
I don't think there are any
Are
questions.
there any questions? Okay, then we can wind up today's session. Thank you again, Ajit, for the talk. And as discussed before, I'd like to remind the audience to subscribe to our Google group, which is the mailing list for information on future talks. And you can also visit our website for details, and the links have been pasted in the chat box. The link to the recorded video will also be posted on the webpage. Thank you again, and have a great evening.